That's what we need. That's what we need at a county meeting. I like your walkie-talkie. I'm impressed.
That's when I call the police when you get out.
I see. Okay, yeah. Let them know I'm apprehendable.
I don't think we have any true members of the public.
Oh, come on.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have any members of the public here, but if we did, we would have a chance for the public to speak. And I like to keep it open the whole time because we don't have big, angry crowds here. We have people that have ideas that they contribute, and we'd like to hear them.
We,
But then,
just so you know, we do have one person on Zoom for public comment if you want IT to switch them over,
okay,
but we got to open up the meeting first.
okay. Yeah, do I have to read this thing? I never do.
I can, if you feel more
Go
comfortable.
ahead, yes.
Good afternoon. This is the Committee to Assess and Recommend Strategies for Housing Creation within the town. It's December 30th, 2024 at 4 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and will be rebroadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. The chair must inquire whether anyone else is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. This meeting will replay via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition 1072. It may also be accessed via the Government Access Channel Live Video on Demand archives on the Town of Barnstable's website. Committee members, Councilor Paula Schnepp.
Here.
Councilor Betty Lutke.
Here.
Councilor Charles Bloom.
Here.
Councilor John Crow. Councilor Gordon Starr. Mary Ann Barboza. Hilda Hay.
Yes.
Chair of Committee Rick Presby.
Here.
Laura Schufelt.
Here.
You have quorum.
I invited Mark Forrest, who most of you probably know today, and Mark has been involved with public issues on the Cape for many, many decades.
Do you want to do the
What?
public comment? You said you wanted to do public comment?
Yeah, I didn't, okay.
Paul's right there.
Okay, Paul, do you have a public comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. And I want to thank everybody else on this important committee. I unfortunately couldn't make it in there tonight, but I will be watching it. I've learned so much I've learned each of you are really experts in this field. I've learned so much through these meetings. What I don't understand was how, when this committee was formed, I don't understand the anger, the rage, and the fury that came before the leadership who were simply trying to look into problems in the town and fix issues. And as we know now, the committee is working diligently on what the issues they were charged with. By the way, before I go any further, I want to give a shout out to Councilor Schnepp and apologize. We got pickled last week. And for those of you that don't know what it means, you can look it up. I don't want to go into it right now, but it has nothing to do with alcohol. Folks, in addition to my previous comments, I don't want to rehash. You know how I feel about how we can solve some of these problems. One thing that I don't believe has been brought up in this committee is the fact that town has not yet reached the 10% minimum for affordable housing. I don't understand how we only have 4%. It seems like we're never, ever going to get to 10. And I hope going forward, under this new leadership, who aren't real estate experts, but they can still solve issues, I hope that we can at least get inch closer to the 10% and start squeezing developers as other 350 towns and communities in the state has. I think we should be doing better at that. And with that, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and everyone else.
I'd like to make a comment. We're at about 6.5% now. towards the 10% that 40B passed in 1969 suggested for you to have complete control over your local zoning. The problem, of course, is that it's a democracy, and so not everybody agrees that that's what we should be doing. And not everybody is concerned about the situation that other people are in. They're concerned about their own struggles with their lives, and so it's a battle to get people to universally agree and to be happy doing what Jimmy Carter would do. And I'm mentioning him because you know why. And so I'm trying on this committee to make it to be as non-prejudicial as possible about what we're talking about, and to at some point be able to sell the idea that helping other people will be good for the Cape in terms of our labor force, in terms of people having housing, food, health care, and so forth. And I appreciate your comment because it's exactly what my main concern in life is.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. Now, just a second of personal privilege. I'd just like to add that I appreciate you letting me go before. Mark Forrest this evening has been wonderful. He's always picked up the phone when I've called him. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. The reason I invited Mark here today is because after our last meeting, when we listed somewhere around 14 things that we wanted to consider to be the things we submitted to the council, afterwards we got talking about the moving the airport to the base and how that would create lots of possibilities for housing and related things. And so I thought that it may not be this committee's responsibility. It's a big thing. A lot of people are involved. It take a long time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight by any stretch of the imagination. But I did think it's important for us on the committee to understand that issue as best possible. And Mark being involved in so many ways on the Cape, as you probably all know, he's a selectman in Yarmouth. He's a county commissioner. He's worked for at least 3 federal representatives. I think you were chairman of one of his staff, one of them, and you've done other things. And I've known Paul I've known him for Paul, yeah, about 50 years, and so I thought he would be a good guy to come and talk to us about this in general, because he has a huge amount of knowledge. He's one of the people who knows the most about things in general on the Cape of anybody I know. So, and he's always willing to do stuff. He just shows up here and he'll do it. So I want to thank him for coming. And he brought somebody who worked for him with him. I don't actually know his name, but I want you to introduce him. And he's going to play a role today too, I guess. So with that, Mark, you're on.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you, everyone, for stepping up to the challenge and helping provide guidance and advice on how we can tackle our affordable housing crisis here on Cape Cod. It's obviously incredibly important, and you all are busy with your other jobs, so to put time and energy into something like this is certainly to be commended. Affordable housing is a priority for the county. I have with me today Joe Pacheco. Joe runs the county's Human Services Department, and within that department, housing is part of his portfolio. I'm going to talk a little bit about master planning at Joint Base Cape Cod and where housing fits in out there. And I'm going to talk, but before I do that, I really want to introduce Joe to talk a little bit about some of the exciting things that we're doing in Barnstable County. He's been incredibly busy working for us on a number of housing initiatives. He's got some exciting things going on, and I thought tonight might be a good idea, a good opportunity for Joe to basically give you just a brief overview of some of the key things that we're working on. So, Joe?
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Pacheco, Human Services Director for Barnstable County. Within our department, we have 2 main housing functions. The first, and Ms. Schufelt can speak to it as well, is our home program, which is federally funded through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, that provides resources to large-scale residential rental programs throughout Barnstable County. And as I said, Laura's been a long-time member, and I think we just reappointed you, right? Yes, thank you for serving. That program this year just got a cut in funding from the feds. Hopefully that does not signal longer-term cuts in the funding, but it's been a very successful program that I've been involved in both here in Barnstable County, but also in prior employment opportunities. It's done phenomenal things, giving people a chance to access rental housing and home ownership in some home programs. And we are also, through the Commissioner's leadership, piloting the Shared Regional Housing Services Program. We just gave a presentation on that to the Home Advisory Council about a week ago. That was funded through county ARPA funds. We received a $308,000 appropriation to establish and implement the pilot program, which provides technical support to the 15 communities in Barnstable County. We're in year 2 of 2. The program will sunset on June 30th, and we are in the process now of doing a strategic review as to what the best path forward is for sustainability should the communities want to continue to sustain that past the pilot period. We've done some real exciting things as part of that. We contracted with Barrett Planning Group, who is our program consultant, in providing the technical support to the 15 communities. We are creating databases, and one of the things the commissioners wanted was through ARPA to have a real sustainable impact on the communities, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And so when we devised this program, we made sure that whether a community chose to sustain participation or not, at the end of the program, first and foremost, it cost the communities nothing. So no community has been charged a fee or will be throughout the life of this pilot program. But B, templates and other tangible documents were going to be provided to each community to utilize as they work towards affordable housing tasks, again, at no cost to them. And so I think we put together an exciting product that hopefully communities have found beneficial and will continue to find beneficial. I think I'll yield there, but I'm happy to take any questions. If you have any now or obviously later on, you're welcome to email me.
Just that second program, can you give a tangible example? I'm just not familiar with it, but it sounds like we're participating.
Yes. Yep.
What tangible output can you talk to me about?
Your planning department's been very active. Laura's been active as well. We're creating a host of different templates and databases. So affordable housing databases, deed riders, which will need legal review. That's in the process right now. The SHI database, making sure that's active and up to date. There's a host of different activities that will be provided, have been provided. We've also launched biweekly office hours, which are open, again, free of charge to the 15 communities on a biweekly virtual basis. So those are some of the things off the top of my head.
And who can access these databases? Is it just planning staff, or could anyone?
Each community was asked to designate point people, and Barnstable designated Corey Pacheco, no relation, and I cannot remember the other gentleman's name. Jim Cup. Yes, Jim Cup first. So those would be Barnstable's 2 point of contacts for the program.
And one last thing, the SHI, of course, is critical.
Yes.
You know, Rick mentioned it, the 40B program. I mean, that's the number we all go by. So how accurate is that, and who's going to maintain that database? Is there, if I went in there right now, is that number 100% accurate? But it's always a moving target. I mean, how do you? Could you explain a little bit more how that works?
We feel pretty good with it, but that would be one of the things, if a community sustained membership in the program, that could be a task that is assigned to the program. Alternatively, if it's a community that chooses to no longer participate, they would be given the database, and it would be on them to maintain keeping it updated to the best of their ability.
Yeah, and thanks, Joe. I will say that the database for SHI has been accurate for and up to date for the communities other than Barnstable. Barnstable's SHI is not accurate and hasn't been for a long time. It wasn't maintained for a long time. So not any fault of Barrett or the county, but the planning department has been working to get it accurate, at least getting units on the count, but they haven't taken units off the count that need to come off. So just so we're all on the same playing field, it's it's not accurate. So
How did that happen? That we have such inaccurate data, and for how long?
for a very long time,
A very long time.
because no one was keeping it up to date. And
Well,
it's,
so it's still not accurate. Barnstable.
I will defer to Laura on that. What we're putting
Yes, sir.
together is as accurate as we have it, but I would defer to Laura specific to Barnstable. Yeah.
Jim just showed up. Yeah.
When will it be accurate, Laura?
You'd have to ask the planning director, who
Well,
just came.
because we can't function without accurate data.
Yes, I agree, and I've been saying it loudly for a decade.
So, well, here's Jim Kupfer at the microphone. Jim, when is this data going to be accurate? What have we got in place that's going to get us back on track?
Right, yeah. Good evening, Jim Kupfer, Director of Planning. Apologies, running in and out of meetings. But I was following along with the conversation. And so, as the gentleman just mentioned, the Regional Housing Services Office, so that's critical for us. You'll see in the Housing Production Plan draft, that's one of our key strategies. That's one of the key strategies that the Planning Board recommended. And that's one of the discussions I've been having with many of you regarding getting us back on track with not only keeping our housing inventory, subsidized housing inventory, updated continually, but going back and understanding where everything really is. And I heard a lot about monitoring. That's exactly one of the primary aspects of the scope I was hoping for, and it sounds like is going to be included in the scope for the Regional Housing Services Office. The monitoring is really key for us because the town does technically monitor a lot of affordable units, but we don't have staff on board. This Regional Housing Services Office could do that for us, and could not just do it for us, but all the communities on the Cape if they wanted to buy in on it. So getting a lot of efficiency and bang for your buck as well. So that's our attack on trying to get that number right. We feel pretty comfortable in terms of the overall number, though. Yes, there are a handful that we lost several years back because of the expiration of the affordability. There's ones that we're still trying to get online that should be online. But in general, over the 700 or so affordable units, I mean, that's a pretty small number that we're still trying to tackle. But this database that they're creating is huge for us, and will hopefully continue on for years to come. If you Google Regional Housing Services Office, just those 4 words, it will bring you to the Metro West Regional Housing Services Office. And I was a part of that when it first established, and it's doing great things now. And that's what we hope to model that after, and get the Cape-wide on track.
But don't we have to participate? I mean, if Barrett could do this on their own, they could do it on their own. I mean, it's no secret we haven't had a housing coordinator, for almost 3 years now? And I also saw that the Cape Cod Commission is advertising for the same such animal. So if we don't have that, what do we owe these guys to make their program work?
Yep. So if you go to the Regional Housing Services Office, actually on the About Us, there's an intermunicipal agreement, just a template right there for you. And that spells out the whole scope, what each town pays for and how they pay for it. Barnstable, we're lucky we have town council form of government, so we can come and have that discussion with you more often. Other smaller towns, they're going to have to kind of strategize each town meeting whether or not to request funding. So it would be a request to town council to enter into an intermunicipal agreement with an entity to be the lead community. Barnstable could take that lead and be the lead community. Certainly have experience doing that. And we would have a consultant or a third party, not necessarily a consultant, but Bear Planning Group currently is that third party that's operating and maintaining the database, new applications, helping administer lotteries, It's all the things, all the little things that in the housing sector is needed for our community. And so one town would be the lead community, and we would enter into an agreement with other municipalities. Again, if Barnstable wants to take the lead on it, I certainly would love to do that, and we would bring along other communities, and again, create those efficiencies. So monitoring, sending out postcards each year to every single affordable unit. They can do it to not just Barnstable, but Mashpee and Falmouth and Sandwich if everybody wants to get on board with it.
No, this sounds like a complementary effort to their effort. It sounds like you're duplicating what they're doing. Or no, it feeds into what they're doing.
They're starting it, and we're hopefully going to take it over after the pilot program expires.
So
Yeah, so-
you'd have no intention to continue this after the pilot. You were just doing it as a demonstration?
Our department has a history of launching initiatives where there has been requests for them and absent other stakeholders coming in to start them up. We're in the process now of strategically figuring out what year 3 of the program will look like. And that includes who the lead entity on that will be, who wants to engage in regards to the 15 communities on the Cape, what the cost will be, what the services are going to be. So we're still in that process right now. So what your planning director is saying has no conflict with us whatsoever. We're all working strategically and cohesively together to find out what plan moving forward is the most sensible for everybody involved.
And ultimately, again, if other communities don't want to jump on board, I think there's a lot of bones here that we could take as the town of Barnstable and run with. But I have high hopes that a lot of communities will see the value in this, and we
Can we do it by ourselves if nobody else takes the opportunity to?
We certainly could. You lose some of that efficiencies and cost savings, but you certainly could. A great database is getting built out right now. So you certainly could do it. Yep.
I have a question. 40B was passed to 60 years or so ago. I have never seen a landlord prosecuted for not adhering to a landlord or a seller of a home, for that matter, to the regulated amount that it could be rented for or sold. Never seen that. We know it's happened a lot. I think part of this job is a real problem because you're fighting with property owners who will owe money or may have broken the law in doing this, and they believe they don't care. And the fight that goes on between the town and the town's staff person and the town's legal staff is going to be a big one on this. And I just can't picture us being that determined to do that when we've had no interest whatsoever for 60 years in doing it, or at least very little that I'm aware of. It's well known in the business that a lot of that stuff isn't enforced. Even when people sell the house and there's a limitation there, sometimes they get sold at full value and not the limited value. So I wonder, to have done this town by town, are the towns really going to want to take on that battle? Who would you like to battle in the town of Barnstable on this issue? I can think of a name, but nobody's going to want to make that fight. Nobody's going to want that. It's going to take quite a determination, and I don't see that because there'll be as many people who believe that it's the wrong thing to do as the right thing to do. It's like the guy who shot the CEO, of the insurance company. People are, they're on both sides of that. They don't believe shooting him is right, but they don't believe that what the guy was doing is right in his business. And so, got this conflict. It's a tough thing. But in order to not lose units, we struggle so hard to get units, and then we let them go, and they fly away, and we don't worry about it. It's absurd.
No, please.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to change.
Yeah.
All right. And the fact of the matter is, we have a lot of support from the towns here on Cape Cod to work together to do that. So we may not be able to claw back or recapture all of them, but there's no reason why we can't, at least starting now, go back as far back as we can and look forward. And this is part of the solution. I would put this on the category of low-hanging fruit. You're right. It might not be easy. It might be challenging.
Off the tree.
No, but I think, quite frankly, we really have an obligation, almost a legal and moral obligation, to pursue this. I mean, these commitments were made in good faith. and we need to basically follow through. We owe it to the people that we represent.
Laura, yeah.
Just a quick question. I know from reviewing previous presentations on the Regional Housing Office that there was a sort of timeline so that you could meet the termination date of the pilot, but hopefully it would continue on in some other form or fashion. I would think you're sort of at a critical juncture right now. Could you give us a sense of what next steps that you're looking at?
Yeah, so we're having those internal conversations right now. We provide bi-monthly updates to the Home Advisory Council, and we're having our internal discussions as to what the engagement process with town leadership is going to be moving forward, recognizing that at least some of these potential costs would not have to be borne by a general fund. They could be borne by housing trusts or CPA funds as well. So we're having all those conversations and are confident we'll have a plan mapped out in short order to start having further engagement.
Given your experience to date, do you have any sense of the cost per municipality? Would it be based on the number of affordable units they have in their portfolio?
We're looking at a base package, and I don't have my notes in front of me, candidly. I was not expecting to brief on this today. I can get you that information, Paula, but I know we were keeping it under $10,000 per community on the base package. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mark came a little bit to talk about the base. Now, one of the things that we talked about after the last meeting was the moving of the airport to the base, and then having all the property in the town of Barnstable to do things with the create affordable housing. Given especially the Barnstable is really the center of affordable housing on Cape Cod, having more housing than any other town in the Cape. But then there's the issue of the ongoing discussion that is moved along some apparently about doing housing at the base. So I thought with Mark knowing how this works, he could come and talk to us about at least the base and what the possibilities are on the base. I don't know how many of you know more than I do about the base. I've been on the base a bunch of times, but I haven't been all over and seen it all. Haven't had the big tour. So we'll get the little tour today, maybe.
I'll do my best to get you a little tour. Joe, could you do me a favor and hand out these two handouts to everybody? For folks that are maybe watching from home, there's on the easel in the display or on the screen, you'll see a fairly large satellite image of Joint Base Cape Cod. What I'm handing out is a variation of the same thing. It doesn't. What folks at home will be seeing is a satellite image that has a lot of groundwater contamination plumes. Oftentimes, when you're talking about any kind of use out of Joint Base Cape Cod, the question always comes, well, isn't that polluted, or where's the pollution, or can you do that there? So I've often found that in giving presentations and discussions about Joint Base Cape Cod, it's sometimes helpful to have a map that depicts a lot of information. So what folks at home are looking at is a bit confusing. What I've presented to the panel is a very simplified version of Joint Base Cape Cod, the area in green, the northern portion of the installation. Much of that is the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve, it's conservation land, and then the area on the bottom third of the facility is what we call the cantonment area. So the northern green area is roughly 15,000 acres. That's conservation land. And for folks in Barnstable wanting to know how important that land is for the town of Barnstable, much of your water supply comes from that area. All right, so for folks, I always like asking groups if they know where their water comes from, or when they flush the toilet, do they know where it goes? The reality is, in the town of Barnstable, your water comes from the northern portion of this installation, and that's why its cleanup, its remediation is vitally important, not just to the communities surrounding the base, but all of Cape Cod. Significant volume of water is basically protected here. Beneath the green blob that you see on the map that I gave you is the Sagamore Lens. The Sagamore Lens is a giant sort of underground reservoir that basically feeds the water resources of the town of Barnstable, in addition to all the other Cape towns. So now you'll notice that this picture is on the front page of a document called the Massachusetts Military Reservation Master Plan Final Report, dated 1998.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does that mean the green area is going to stay that way for all the rest of our lives?
That area is conservation land. It's protected under Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution. As most people know, Article 97 land is supposed to carry with it the highest protections.
Yep.
So that land is overseen by a 3-member board called the Environmental Management Commission, and their responsibility is to make sure that that land is protected so your water supplies and water resources are protected
So it
long-term.
doesn't exist in this discussion. It's just off the
Off
table.
the table. Off the table.
Thank you.
All right? That's very, very important for people to understand. That's off the table. Because our water resources are so fragile, because our water supplies are under enormous pressure, and because we've lost many water supplies, it was determined that this area be set aside for the long-term benefit of Cape Cod. And so you need to understand that. The better job we do at protecting this area, the better quality of water residents of Barnstable will have. That's not to say that there might be pollution or other issues down gradient or downstream. That's a whole other separate topic. But the bulk of the water resource emanates from this area. So this was a proposal that was actually launched to create the reserve. It was established in 2001. Congressman Delahunt was sort of the champion for it. And when I was his chief of staff, it was my responsibility to sort of plot out the strategy and the game plan for getting it done. So I've worked on this for a good chunk of my career. I've actually spent probably close to 50 years working on issues related to the military installation. So I generally am very comfortable. I'm very happy to speak to almost any group that's interested in what's going on out here. And as you can see, when you look at the map in front of you, you'll see that that area is not totally pristine. There are areas that are actively being remediated right now, and it's critical that that happens so that we can protect those water resources long term. So now, the southern end of the installation, the cantonment area, is the 5,000 acres. This would be the subject to a master plan update. So this was a 1998 master plan for the entire reservation. One of the recommendations in this master planning document was to protect this area. We learned how valuable that area is from a water supply point of view. So now that that area is protected, there's a need to update the master plan on the southern portion of the installation. So out at Joint Base Cape Cod, it's roughly 5,000 acres, give or take, on the southern portion. And within it, there's a lot of very interesting activity. Air Station Cape Cod is based out at this facility. They use a portion of the runway that you can see on the southern portion of the installation. They have a significant amount of housing out at the installation. And we have, obviously, Air Guard, Army Guard, training operations sort of based there, centered there. This installation provides a significant economic benefit. I mean, the economic ripple effects, the number of jobs, contracting, and so forth is quite significant and has a major role to play in terms of the overall economy of Cape Cod. I should also point out that the county has facilities out at Joint Base Cape Cod. And in the very southern portion of the cantonment area, we have the Alternative Septic System Test Center. Some of you may have heard about this facility. That is where we test innovative septic system technologies. That's where we pioneer new types of systems that can help better remediate nutrients and some of the other pollutants that we've been challenged with here on Cape Cod. There has been a transfer station serving the Upper Cape towns. So there's a rail. Right now, a lot of the waste goes off by truck, but at one time we had a fairly sufficient rail link to the installation. So there are a multitude of functions that are going on out in the southern portion of the base. There's a significant number of jobs. And so at this point, it's important to start taking a look at the future of the installation. So mass development, the county has made this whole initiative a priority. The county commissioners wrote to the governor's office last year urging the administration to make the master planning of the base a priority, the need for a new master plan. And mass development has been tasked with the job. Mass development is a state agency. Some of you are familiar with it. They do a lot of development and master planning work on military bases. In fact, they were created originally back in the 70s to take on the role of doing master planning at military bases. Back in the 70s, we lost a number of active duty installations. They were shut down. The reason why the commissioners have been promoting the idea of an updated master plan is to guide investment decisions out at this installation, and to do so in a way that could keep the base functioning in the near future. The Pentagon has basically made it very clear to the Congress that there's a need to shrink military infrastructure in the United States. There's still a significant amount of military infrastructure that is in excess of what the Pentagon needs. And so we're not the only ones looking at master planning. There are other communities, other regions around the country that are doing what they can to sustain their military base activities. What helps us is the fact that we have a diversity of military tenants here at Joint Base Cape Cod. That's a strength, that's an asset, and obviously the Coast Guard has a major presence there as well. But in many respects, there are portions of the installation that are underutilized. And so there's been a lot of discussion about accessing property, relinquishing property. The idea is to make those decisions with respect to the future use of the installation in a way that's well thought out and that has a vision that can sustain the installation for the long term.
What do you have for a wastewater treatment plant on the base now, and what in the future is going to happen? Is there the ability to expand that, or?
The wastewater treatment plant has been for years run and operated by the Air Force,
Yep.
The Air National Guard. For a while it was run by the Air Force, was taken over by the Air National Guard. The Air National Guard has privatized the wastewater treatment plant operation and the maintenance of the facilities there, including the water infrastructure in the cantonment area. That has been taken over by a firm named Converge. And I know there have been discussions about future uses of the wastewater treatment plant involving the town of Barnstable. The town manager's office has been very involved in those discussions. And as many of you know, your assistant town administrator, Andy Clyburn, has a lot of history with the installation, is very familiar with it.
So that's down in the orange area?
Yes. So what we have argued as commissioners is that in doing a master plan update, to take a look at, particularly in addition to a host of meeting the needs of all the tenants that are there, but also taking a hard look at housing. There's a significant need for housing for those who are serving in the military and are living in our communities. We have a problem right now with the Coast Guard. The housing allowance for Coast Guard personnel doesn't necessarily help meet the rising cost of housing here in southeastern Massachusetts and on Cape Cod. So the Coast Guard is having difficulty recruiting personnel. So we have a situation here where the lack of affordable housing is not a problem just for the surrounding communities, but also for those that are serving and would normally get housing out at the installation. So what we have recommended is a hard look at the southwestern section of the cantonment area, and that's in the other map that I've given you. And in that area, at one time we had between 800 and 1,000 units of housing. Most of those units are no longer there. The condition has been such that many of those units have been demolished, and that would be an ideal location from a master planning exercise to see where we can meet some of the challenges both facing the communities but also facing our military personnel and our Coast Guard. So that is largely, those are key components of the master planning exercise. Mass development has committed resources to this effort, significant resources, and they are working as an active partner with the Massachusetts National Guard. And There's also another partner involved in this, and this is the task force that the Commonwealth has set up. It's a military task force that's involved in sustaining the long-term future of all of our military assets. This task force is chaired by the Lieutenant Governor, so that task force and the Lieutenant Governor are now going to be actively involved in this whole initiative to develop a vision and a future for this facility. In terms of public involvement and citizen involvement, there's an interest in recreating the level of citizen involvement and engagement and public participation that we did in this original 1998 master plan. We had a community working group comprised of representatives of the local towns. They will be, a new group will be convened, actually, the new group that would be convened is going to look a lot like the current Citizens Advisory Group. There's a group called the Military Citizens Advisory Council, and that group currently exists. It has representation from all the towns, town officials, as well as a variety of civic environmental groups. And so that'll largely, they will carry on that role and provide a lot of public input and oversight into this process. So Mass Development has put out an RFP to hire a consultant, and the goal is to get a consultant on board sometime in the spring of next year. And hopefully this work can get well underway, as we approach the summer of 2025. So I think, quite frankly, housing is not only critical for the Cape and the Cape economy and the Cape quality of life, but also for the military and for the base.
What's a little bigger picture of the number of military that are living off the base that can't afford to live there and can't find a place to live and so forth and so on? So they may be crossing the bridge for all we know to get to work.
Well, it's become increasingly challenging. I don't have the exact numbers. We'd be taking a look at that in this sort of this
you
next
think
phase.
Is it 1,000? Is it 500? I wonder. I have no idea, of course, but you may not either. But I'm just
the vast majority of people that serve in the Coast Guard and are doing work here, there's a significant. Let's put it this way: there's a significant number of people that are actually there at the base working, but that have to live in the surrounding communities and are having trouble finding.
I was just kind of curious about roughly what the number would be, but that's. And
I'd say an educated guess would be between 500 and 1,000 people.
I mean, I'm always talking about how much housing you need here and there. So, I'm thinking about that. That's all, and I have no idea.
Well, the number I just gave you is just an educated guess,
that's
but
fine.
we'll be diving into that much more in a much more comprehensive way as we get into this master planning update process. So that's in a nutshell what's going on out there. Now, I know there have been previous discussions between town officials and base officials about airport and airport operations. I know that the Air National Guard is very much open to the idea of supporting, a civilian operation. It's not unusual for military bases, Coast Guard facilities to be paired up with civilian airports. In fact, with the National Guard, it's far more common than not. The reason why the Air Guard has been over the years utilizing this area is because it was once used by the Air Force, and then the Air Guard took it over, but they sustained an active duty mission for the Air Force in terms of providing surveillance and training. So that mission has been relocated to Barnes Airport. And again, that's a municipal airport. The cost of operations for the Air Guard is much more manageable out there. But again, there are air functions that are underway here, more or less mostly by the Coast Guard.
So what you're saying is there's additional capacity there that's not being used.
I don't want to put I don't want to speak for the Air Guard, but they have made it very clear to Barnstable officials that they'd be open to having discussions about, airport operations, civilian airport operations taking place out there. I think that's something that just needs to be further examined and further studied.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. This is fantastic. I really appreciate that you're keeping Barnstable informed, because we're not contiguous with the base. But we do have that piece, the airport piece, the airfield piece, which keeps us very interested in the developments out there. And I hope to explore that. I think it's an amazing opportunity. And you've shed more light on mass development, some of their capabilities. It's an amazing opportunity for us to look at what could be possible. And we had the folks from Joint Base Cape Cod. I think they came to a lot of the different municipalities, and they came here and made a presentation. And Rick, to your point, they did say that, they do have people off base, and it's becoming problematic to find housing for these folks. So that's a real issue out there. And also at that same meeting, they reiterated that they would be very open to discussions on sharing the airfield. And to your point, they had an F-15 mission, that's what Mark was describing, that is left there. And when that left, that leaves an enormous amount of capacity at that airfield. The Coast Guard mission is an absolutely critical one for our seafaring life here, but it has a very light footprint. So there is certainly capacity out there, and it would be wonderful if we could, through this study, explore it rather than just continuing to talk about, what if, maybe this, maybe that we could get some hard data, look at assets, look at capabilities, and really come up with some good data.
What do you think the future of the Space Force is in terms of any expanded role it might have on the base?
That's a very interesting question. I don't have, when I work for a congressman, I could easily get that information and be briefed on it. All I can provide is an educated guess. I think the current mission is one that'll be sustained long term, because part of their mission is to basically track intercontinental ballistic missiles, and as long as there's a threat that exists in terms of that activity, I think that's the mission. That mission will be sustained. The challenge is whether or not technology is evolving in such a way that it can be sustained someplace else. I think the thing that we've learned over the years is that this installation has been here since 1933. And it was created largely because the training activity that was once going on in the Army up in the Devons area was seen as needing to expand and a bit too noisy for the people up there. Now, this is back in the 1930s. And what we've seen here on Cape Cod is that the mission has changed over time. At one time, this was a mobilization site during World War II. At one time, there were over 100,000 people living out there back in the 30s. Very intensive amount of development. There was training. The training for Normandy went on out at this facility. If you went out to Washburn Island, you may still see remnants of training activity that took place, back in the 40s. And then during the Cold War, it had a vital mission to play. We had missile sites. The whole Beaumark missile site section of the installation was being actively served to deal with threats during the Cold War, and then we were running F-15s, and before that the Delta Dart jet that was intercepting Soviet aircraft looking to penetrate American airspace. So the missions and the functions have changed over time, but the reason why this installation has continued to survive is because of its location. It's a very, very strategic asset in terms of its location, and the military has found different ways to put it to use. And I think those military assets can still be sustained, but it's a bit more challenging now, because as you've heard, there's a lot more infrastructure there to manage, and with the Pentagon looking to access property, the question is some of the property here at this installation, can it be accessed and converted to other compatible uses that both help maintain our national security, provide training, and now that housing has become increasingly an issue for both the military and the rest of us, to what degree can this installation play a role in addressing that problem, in sustaining the viability of military service in this area? So there are a lot. I see this whole exercise as nothing but positive and leading to a very, very positive result, because I think the installation is vital to our nation. It's vital to the Cape, And I think this exercise could lead to a real win-win, both for the Cape community and for the military and those that serve.
As probably the oldest person in the room right now, you get a perspective on change. That during my life, as I remember, my father was like this when he got older and told me about stuff. Things change in ways you can't imagine, and so this is something where we have to a lot of smart people have to think about the future down the road and what it's really going to be like and what really will not deter, let's say, military activity there that would be necessary, and as opposed to development of housing for people. It's really hard to know, and I certainly hope that there are people who aren't thinking about it with self-interest. They're thinking about it with what the future, what will be good for people in the future living on Cape Cod. And that's a struggle we've had here for a long time, and I have lots of sad but funny stories about the things that I have asked about years ago that people thought were ridiculous, that they should have done exactly what I was asking about. And, I don't want that to happen, but do you have to be my age to think of that way? I hope not. You don't have an answer for that.
No, I don't have an answer, but I hear what you're saying. No, yeah. I think this whole initiative out at the base, and again, if you've got your map there, it's the southwest corner of the installation. That is the area that would be the key focus. But the Guard has identified a number of other areas that they think have some opportunities as well. So there's going to be plenty to look at, plenty of work to do. Yeah. And to me, if there's a way to somehow recreate anywhere between 800 to 1,000 housing units out in this installation, that would be huge. And like I said, there's a win-win, I think, potential here for both the military and others that are serving, as well as the community as well. Again, remember now, many of the people that are serving with a housing allowance, and they need to find a place to stay in the surrounding community. So it's conceivable that by developing units there, it alleviates some of the pressure and some of the burden, some of the surrounding communities as well.
Well, I hope you'll hang around long enough to have some control over this and some input, and you've got a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience.
Well, I'm the mass development people, we've spent a lot of time meeting with them. I should point out that the Cape Cod Commission staff, Christy Senatori and her team, have been very involved in helping sort of shape the scope of work for this master planning exercise. There's a hope that their involvement can be sustained throughout this process. I think the Commission's involvement in the master plan of 1998 was crucial, and I think it continues to play. They can continue to play in a very important role in this exercise. And then going forward, there's no doubt in my mind the communities will be active participants in this. Having seen what mass development has done at Devens, I'm even more encouraged, because Devens is an area where there's active training, but there's also economic development, and there's civilian use. So you've got housing, military training, and economic development, all compatible, all fitting together in one fairly confined area. And just in the past few years, the number of economic development projects that have been initiated out there has been outstanding, and all in areas of economic development that we would have never thought of 10, 15 years ago. We're talking about areas of battery development, EV, facilities, all sorts of high-tech infrastructure. What makes it attractive is being able to come in and get your permits and get up and running in a very defined time frame. There's a very precise formula for getting a project done. So literally, you'll get an answer within 75, 80 days.
Is there any realistic way of having anybody from Barnstable officially involved in this whole process, or are they already?
I think that remains to be seen. I don't know if Barnstable is represented on the Military Civilian Advisory Committee. Those meetings are open to the public. It's a very public process. I don't see any reason. You certainly can get on the mailing list and come to the meetings when they get underway in earnest.
Well, given Barnstable's size and impact on the Cape, I think it is a reason for it. It's not just self-interest. It's community interest of the whole Cape.
Well, I think if there's a recommendation that you might want to forward to the council, and that is to ask to participate in the planning process
I
and
have
be
no
on.
say in it. It's just, I'm not really even.
No, this will be a mass development and, National Guard decision, but again, there's no harm in asking. There are a number of civic groups and public groups that have a seat at the table.
Yeah. Well,
Thanks. Just two questions. Does this also have a timeline in terms of completion of a master plan? I mean, is it a 2, 3, 4-year process, or is it a?
It's expected to be between 12 and 18 months.
And it's commenced, or is it?
It hasn't commenced yet. There's a consultant, there's an RFP out on the street.
Okay.
Consultant should be selected this spring, and that's by early summer, this process should be underway. So I would make a note on your calendar that it's time to check in and revisit this probably sometime, in April, May.
This is just to throw out as something to think about. I'm looking at this large satellite photo and knowing that we're connected by 2 fragile bridges, of which we're very hopeful that one of them is going to be completely replaced and the other possibly replaced. But is that variable part of the planning? And because if those bridges are not, I can't imagine that significant economic development or even additional military uses would be advisable.
The bridges will be replaced. There's no doubt in my mind. They're necessary. They're vital.
I
There's
agree.
such significant assets in infrastructure on Cape Cod that it's inconceivable to not have those bridges there. We do have the money to take care of the Sagamore. Now the question is what's the prospect of funding the Bourne Bridge? And I'm a believer. I have to give this administration, Governor Healy, a lot of credit because, we were basically stuck in the mud for the longest time. And once she took office, things took off. And we took advantage of these windows of opportunity that we get from time to time to sort of pursue projects like this. And so they stepped it up. They began the planning and design process, put together quality applications to outline the need, submitted them, the funding, with this administration and the past Congress, set aside the dollars that were needed. I find it hard to believe that the federal government is going to retreat in meeting what is clearly an overwhelming infrastructure obligation that exists around this country. If there's one thing that both Republicans and Democrats can agree on, it's the need to fix our bridges and our roads and our highway infrastructure. And I noticed, when bridges were being replaced in Republican districts, they were just as thrilled to get them replaced there as they were in Democratic districts. So I'm somewhat cautiously optimistic that we're going to find bipartisan support to sustain a fairly high level of infrastructure investment. And, we will figure out a way to take care of the Bourne Bridge. I'd like to at least see the planning and design work for that continue. And I think this administration is probably prepared to do that.
Well, I was very impressed with what I've seen so far with that. And again, I would hope if there's any concerns that any of the funding is vulnerable, that we would be contacted so that we could.
Oh, trust me, if there's a serious risk, you'll definitely be on the list of groups to be informed, no question.
anything else?
No, I'm happy to stick around. I know you might have some other business to conduct, but I'm happy to stick around at the conclusion of your meeting if there's anybody that has any individual questions or concerns.
Well, we do have another sort of part of the agenda that's pretty significant, and you're welcome to stay around. Maybe you'll have some ideas. It may not be the most exciting moment in your life, but you never know.
Well, I'm going to step out briefly to take care of a phone call, but then
Okay.
I will return.
Okay, thank you so much. This has been really good information for us. I think it's been very balanced as far as I'm concerned, and that's very helpful for me, and I'm sure for other people here. And you've done your job well.
Thanks, Mark.
I brought this piece of paper here that has what was my version, may not be perfect, of the list we did at the last meeting on the 25th of November about our ideas. And some of it may not have been worded quite correctly. I was writing it all down. And one of the things that happened, we didn't get the minutes because I forgot to put the minutes on the agenda for this meeting. And so therefore, we can't approve minutes at this meeting because they weren't on the agenda. And so I drew this up for us to work with tonight. But if you see something there that you remember differently, feel free. I'll duck below the counter here and you can say whatever you want. And I didn't do anything to screen these, obviously. I don't consider that to be my job. And not everybody who, not the person that suggested each one of these is even here today. But the first one is the use of the armory for people who have been on the Cape forever. And that was a quote. And the armory's been used before. I mean, so you have a comment?
I was just going to say, we probably need to know if there's a plan for the armory now, what the status of the armory is. And maybe the counselors know, but I don't, so.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
Paula has a comment.
Okay, Paula?
Hey, Rick. I think you've captured some of the conversations that we've had in not only last meeting, but previous meetings.
Yeah.
But I'm a little concerned that some of these are pieces of strategies that exist already in documents that we've reviewed or have on hand, our housing production plan. So I'm not sure what the intent is today for discussion and where we're heading.
What I would like is to do the college professor thing and tell people to get another pair to work with to do the research on these.
I believe that was an assignment from last meeting.
It was an assignment for last meeting, but I assigned it to one person at a time, and I don't know how many people actually did it. Not everybody's here. Sometimes when you work with somebody else, you're more forced to get something done, and that was the only reason I'm saying that. I'm not looking at you in particular. Maybe I'm looking in the mirror, but,
Well, did anybody do the assignment?
No one has handed anything in. That's what we would discuss today. If somebody has done research on a given subject, there's lots of stuff in here, obviously almost everything, that requires additional research. And
So maybe I should frame this a little differently. We've received an extension to complete our work by March 31st.
Right.
And I'd sort of like to work back from that date and determine what our expectation is for delivery of strategies.
right.
Because my concern is that we keep expanding the list of things to discuss, and I'd like to know how we're going to move toward.
Well, I think this was, in my intention, this was a final expansion. If somebody has a wonderful idea they want to add to it, of course, we're not going to say no. And that's how the airport thing really came up. It came up after last meeting, and we were having this conversation. I thought that's worth talking about. But I'm not going to turn down good ideas just because we don't. But there's a lot of work here to be done. I understand that, and I think that for a lot of these things, there are a lot of questions and regulations and other things. The last meeting, Laura had a couple of things that she had us kind of reject because they were impossible to do for one reason or another. And so the armory is not one that I would spend a lot of time on right now, but yeah.
I would just say on the armory, that's a subset of a strategy to use municipal property. And the armory itself is very problematic. It has to be used for municipal purposes, or there was also state legislation that said it could be used for a for-profit museum. Those are the only two things that could be done with that, unless we get further legislation.
I ran a shelter there for a while at one time, but I don't know if that was before the law changed.
Maybe before, but I don't know, Paula may know more about that. But that's my understanding, because there was some point, I think the Pirate Museum was going to go in there, so the legislation was done for a for-profit museum. But again, I don't think it has to be looked at specifically. It can fall under the greater strategy of using town property,
Okay.
which I believe,
It
you
doesn't-
know, feeds into being an affordable strategy because of the cost of the land is taken out of the equation.
Okay, thank you. The second one, I wrote that down as I had it. It doesn't make sense to me, but does anybody remember that?
I think one of the items that has been brought forth is looking at whether we should be regulating short-term rentals as a response to our year-round housing. And I don't know if you poll us, if we all think that is a strategy that we should be recommending or not, but I think that the make Airbnb only for year-round rentals is a subset of that.
So it is doing things to encourage or reward or get people to use build houses for, or apartments for year-round rentals and not short-term rentals.
I believe Counselor Crowe is the one who was suggesting this. He's not here today, so I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I think that's probably the direction.
Well, it
he
makes
was-
sense to create year-round housing for people. I mean, we are, you know, overwhelmed with short-term rentals on the Cape, obviously. We're not going to stop them all.
I think Laura has a
Oh,
comment.
I think this one, first of all, there's two around short-term rentals.
Right.
2 and 3.
Yep.
And, you know, the regulatory structure may have something about making them for year-round rentals. You know, I mean, it's my opinion that there's not enough of them or enough people who are willing to or wanting to make them year-round rentals, or they would, even with incentives.
What if there's money involved?
It doesn't matter. There's money involved on HAC has a program, and so does the Lower Cape CDC, and they're called CDP now. You know, they have a half dozen people that have taken it. And a half dozen in Barnstable means nothing. It might mean it in Wellfleet. So I think that we can keep it on here because Councilor Crowe isn't here, and I don't want to, you know, reject something without the proposer giving a, you know, their take on it. But
So you don't think it would amount to anything if we did it?
no, not anything that's impactful. I don't think so. We have, you know, the commission's statistics are, or the American survey statistics are, short-term rentals are 3 to 5% of the housing units in Barnstable. You know, I think we have other proposals that are more impactful.
Let me just add one thing. I mean, I don't doubt that you're right, so, but we have some good friends that have 2 houses here, and they rent them short-term. But they live in Randolph. So they're coming down all the time to do maintenance. They do the maintenance themselves. And I've talked to them about even doing it year-round. I've gotten all their math and everything. And I think they'd do it with a relatively modest amount of additional money in the thing. But that's just somebody I talked to find out what them.
Right, that's anecdotal, and I don't doubt that they might, because they're, you know, but how many of those are there?
Not enough to make it worth it.
In my opinion, no, but
Yeah.
you know.
Transfer tax on real estate. Anybody else have anything to say about that, by the way?
Counselor Starr and I have been looking at this. We may just bring it right forward to council as a home rule petition. So if the committee wants to consider this as a strategy, that would strengthen the support if we move this forward, so.
So you believe this has some possibilities?
And we're talking about the transfer tax, just to be sure, just
Even on
as,
the transfer tax?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, right, okay.
Yes.
I
So
agree.
that means, what should we do as a group with that? You're working on it.
Rick,
So The mission of this ad hoc committee is to recommend strategies.
Right.
It doesn't have to solve the problem of the content of the strategy, the complete, wording of what that transfer tax or whatever resolve we put on the town council agenda, but it has to identify it as an important way to, move forward. I believe the transfer tax could be bundled with increase the percentage of Community Preservation Act funds for housing and possibly federal community. I mean, there's a number of them here that talk about increasing resources, revenue sources for housing programs. And so if you want to bundle that as a strategy, that would be a recommendation. So
my thought had been, and it may not be the correct one, is to do some research and lay it out where you answer all the questions, or as many questions you can think of that will be asked by the council as already being answered. Do you think it's unnecessary for us to do that?
I don't know if it's unnecessary, but I'm not sure how that is. I mean, Councilor Starr and I will probably just do it.
Well, that's what I asked you a minute ago, and because if you were working on it with Councilor Starr, then we'd give you that responsibility and leave it alone. I mean, you could be doing that on behalf of the council and this group. I mean, I'm just saying what the possibility. I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do here. I'm not taking a position.
Rick?
You're giving me a funny look. Yeah, that's because she's.
I would suggest that if, this is something that, I think is important, and whether it's under the whole umbrella of increasing revenue or increasing the revenue for affordable housing, that we then also say that we support whatever it's going to be, the home rule petition that councilors Schnepp and Starr have introduced. I think that's the way we would frame it for the council, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that perhaps the strategy, based on what's been said here, is to increase revenue for affordable housing.
Right.
And I've heard other people say, well, we'll just take more of the CPA funds. And I wouldn't support that. I think it's important to keep those CPA funds available for the recreation and the open space. I don't think necessarily taking more of that and putting it to housing is a solution. So I like these other funding revenues. So I think, Rick, this should be absolutely one of ours, is to increase revenue, and then we identify a number of sources, this being one of them. I don't know if we have others on the list. Do you see others? Paula, you had mentioned something.
Well, this probably is not an increase. It's identifying that there's, I guess it's CDBG money for housing. And historically, that has happened, but it would.
So you're knocking out number 10.
I'm not sure everyone agrees with Councilor.
I mean,
like,
you-
No,
That's what you just-
I'm personally knocking out number 10, but I think Paula's right. I don't think everybody agrees with me, again, because I put equal weight towards the historic and the open space and recreation.
Rick, can I comment on that?
Yeah.
CPA has 10% for each of the three historic, and then there's everything that's left over. 70% is in undesignated, and I think what this was saying was to keep the 10% across the board, remembering that Land Bank took care of a lot of conservation land and took a lot of our CPA funds for the first 10 years because it came right off the top to pay the debt from the land bank. So housing has been the least spent of the three legs of the stool of CPA. And so increasing the amount that goes to affordable housing I think is, first of all, is worthy of doing, and second of all, makes it a fairer playing field for the three different categories. So I'd include it.
So what about changing it to 30, 30, 30 with 10 left over that's flexible?
No. No, because if you look at it, historic preservation has been used on public buildings, and that's fine, that has worked. But the open space and recreation has taken the bulk of the money. And I am, support conservation, but we also had the land bank on top of that. So there is a lot of conservation land in this town, and that takes away from land being used for other things.
Can I?
Yes, please.
I would agree with what Laura just said, because if there's extra money and it can be used with housing being in such a desperate position, I think it would work in helping us get in some more housing for our community, because those are extra that is just laying on the side.
What I'd like to see then is the proposal of, because we already have been giving quite generously to the Affordable Housing Trust from the CPA funds, very generously. So I'm just wondering if we could quantify that to some degree, how much, how long, that kind of thing. I don't think it should just be a blanket thing like we did all this. And we did do a lot of land bank stuff. We bought a lot of properties, 20 years ago and such. But it would have to be doesn't mean then you swing the pendulum all the way the other way. It needs to be balanced.
Okay, use town assets for affordable housing. Well, obviously, what are we thinking of for town assets? Do we have some examples that we're thinking of? You mean land or buildings or both, or old schools or what?
Land, buildings, everything.
Now, when we say that, do we make a statement that says they have to consider that as a leading possibility when something comes up and available?
We can make that recommendation. I mean, I would list the ones that we know, just because I think.
Well, you know what happens, the local village sometimes objects.
Always objects. There's not a case where it hasn't objected.
Yeah, but if you make it kind of semi-mandatory, then it takes away some of that ability.
Well, we can't do that, but we can suggest.
No, I mean the recommendation.
Yes. I think that there actually is something called Article 1 that when the town manager has control of the land, because he takes it for what it has to happen, that number one, first it goes to conservation, then it goes to housing, if they say that there isn't a need for it. It hasn't been used for a number of years, maybe 20, but Article 1 is still on the books. So just enforce it.
We know hire a staff person to monitor affordable compliance is, I assume, one we don't have any debate about. Although, because now we got the county. No, the county's just doing it temporarily, aren't they? Or are they? Was that what he said?
So you want me to?
You're gonna do?
I'll jump in.
The county gonna do the whole Cape
So
on monitoring?
can I?
The county, excuse me, the county is doing a pilot study.
Yeah.
And our goal is to make sure that this is a service that can be picked up in collaboration with the towns. Who takes the lead has yet to be figured out. But the idea, I think we realize that there's a need for it. And so I think we're going to figure out a way to sustain it. You can certainly keep it on your list. I think it makes a great deal of sense. But we commissioned a pilot study with a committee to work on coming up with a set of recommendations. We're getting close, but we're not quite there yet. But I think you can sense from the discussion tonight that there's clearly a need for this.
Well, that was good. Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say that monitoring has been one of the major asks from all the towns, even if they have a housing coordinator, which we don't, as we've said. But housing coordinators do things other than monitoring units.
Yes.
And so the need, that doesn't, if the county takes over and we pay for the county to take over the monitoring of the units, there's still a need to have a housing person on staff for a variety of reasons, for development, for inclusionary, for planning, for all kinds of reasons. And I would say that that we take out the monitoring and we just say that we need a experienced housing person, not someone who's on the job training. Thanks.
Yeah, I might chime in on this one. I think maybe one of our strategies would be to recommend that we do take the lead on this. We become the lead municipality. And then back to the airport, the airport manager is leaving in the March timeframe. And the airport commission is going to hire a firm to help look for one. We've been unsuccessful here. Perhaps one of the strategies we recommend is we'd hire a firm. If we can't do it on our own, which we haven't been able to, that we put some money against this because it is so critical, and then we get that person hired. And as I said, I'm pretty sure the Cape Cod Commission is looking for the same person. Not sure what the salary structure is there, but, and I don't know if anyone knows, Laura, if you know, did Nantucket they switched, didn't they, recently? Did they get someone?
They did.
They did. I don't know if we know what they did, but this seems to me unfathomable that we've let this go this long and we wouldn't pull out all the stops to find someone.
When I picture doing this job, I picture spending a lot of time with the town attorney. And I don't picture my living in, Wellfleet and having a good relationship with the town attorney and the town of Barnstable, where most of it will take place. Yeah, but, just a thought.
No,
What?
the majority of the job is paperwork, is detailed paperwork. And, and then following up.
Yeah.
That's the majority of it. But anyway, I think we need to have a housing person on board if we were going to be the lead agency. I don't think that, not having a housing person and being the lead agency makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think we have three really good strategies, right, with the housing person being one, getting on board, being the lead municipality, and Paula and your recommendation that's coming from, if we support that, that would be a third strategy.
What were the three again? Do you have the numbers? Are they numbers that are on here?
Pardon me?
The three that you just recommended, are they numbered on here?
I think they're not really on here. They're just something I've taken together, from what we've been talking about today.
So can you say them again for me?
Well, maybe there is something on here about a housing person, but, getting a housing person.
That's number 6.
Yep.
Okay, number 6, good. Getting on board with being the lead municipality with the commission.
Yep.
And recommending, that this committee recommend that that we support your, what did you call it, town rule?
Transfer tax?
Are you talking about the transfer tax?
No, the thing that you and Gordon are going to do.
Well, that would be a home rule petition for having a transfer.
Okay, the home rule petition.
I think we were saying that was going to be increasing revenue and then having
Increasing
that as a
revenue,
subset
yes.
of that. And using town assets, I think is,
Paula, first.
I appreciate the conversation and the identification that it's critical that we have adequate resources, staffing, consultants, et cetera, to do this important work of monitoring and compliance. But we're kind of, it gets a little hazy on what that strategy should be, because generally our town manager has the responsibility and authority to carry out, our directives. We probably shouldn't get into the minutia of how that happens and who's getting hired and what, obviously we know that there's a gap in what our town should be doing in terms of monitoring and compliance. How that gets completed really falls on the shoulders of our town manager. So I think we need to craft something that,
Well, he's talked about this, he's been told about this a million times, and he hasn't done anything about it. So do we just do the same thing over again and forget about it?
I think that we need to make sure that when we're reviewing the budget in June for our town planning department, we need to ensure that there is sufficient resources to do the work that we've identified.
That's a
Okay.
good strategy.
That's good. Good answer. Thank you.
So I would surely hope that would involve hiring somebody who has expertise, and probably not just one person, because I know it is a fairly significant, but we need as a council, and I'm speaking because ultimately it's the council that's going to, we're going to recommend to the council, and the council has to, we need to be able to support that, and say we're willing to spend a little bit more money in this area because we think, look at how much we're spending on our, implementing our comprehensive wastewater management plan. Millions of dollars. Just the staffing implementation. I mean, if we think housing is an important issue for us to get behind, we need to make sure the resources are there. What we can't comprehend, because that's not our job, is all the different facets of our personnel system in terms of, how you rank this person, how they're compensated, whether you let them work remotely, and whether it should be a consultant. That's not our job to figure it out, but we need to make sure that we're identifying that it needs to be done, and that next year at this time, when we want an SHI that's updated, it's handed to us, and we can feel pretty confident. I mean, I will agree with Jim that, getting 100% accuracy is difficult, given that things change. But I think there are some basic things that needed to be updated, and I would hope that in a short span of time that occurs. So, but I just, again, we've talked about this in various meetings that we're in, and whether it's an agenda meeting or something else, about how do you make change occur? How do you communicate that this is really now a priority? And I think that's how we need to frame that strategy. I think what's also important, and we talked about this earlier today, was we haven't talked about the zoning pieces, and we've identified some areas in town that, some zoning changes would be helpful for us moving forward on creating some new housing. So I think we need to have a strategy that addresses that, and that we need a mechanism to make that move forward. So it doesn't feel like you're languishing and saying, But, so that's sort of my 2 cents. I think revenue piece, and then including the transfer tax, the strategy on using our public assets, the zoning, and then maybe, this would be a fourth, but something that shows that we want our resources in the administrative portion of our housing program. I mean, that's really what we're saying, that the admin piece is as important as some of the other parts, because if we don't know what's affordable, what we have in our inventory, and so.
I would agree with you, Paul, on that one, that without somebody in place so everything can be updated and keep revolving, then we're not sure where we're really going to be at what point. So I agree with you with that there should be money in the upcoming budget for the town to hire somebody to fill that spot. Thank you.
You have something? Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Paula. That was great in framing, I guess, what we've talked about, and reminding us all that, we can't wave our wand on administrative changes. I would include the inclusionary, investigation of the inclusionary and, based on data, which is what the economic feasibility analysis would do. Obviously, again, can't make that happen, but the inclusionary needs to be in zoning, needs to have some teeth behind it, and that's how you do it. And that's a council.
You mean inclusionary in terms of incomes and percentages?
Yes.
To reflect
Yes.
the changes in incomes and cost of housing on Cape Cod, so the old inclusionary stuff doesn't really work for a lot of people.
Well, the inclusionary needs to be balanced. It needs to work for everyone. You can't be so balanced on the side of, or leaning towards the side of affordability and high numbers that it makes development impossible. But it also can't be so little that we're not getting enough out of it.
Well, if you look at the history is really little. It's amazingly little.
Well, that's what the study that's the data that's needed to put the percentages in effect that balance the developer's need to the housing need. That's the best we can do. And I think that in the zoning, under the zoning envelope, there's a flexible zoning for, increased units on, rezoning different areas for flexibility and density, and then also inclusionary, getting the inclusionary ordinance into shape and have it based on data.
I don't know how many times I've read that builders don't use 40B because it's too complicated. And, I don't know how I did it all these years, but it was supposed to be simpler.
Developers don't use 40B. If there's a choice, they won't use 40B. If they don't have a choice, they'll use 40B. But if they have a choice, they won't, because it has profit limitations with it. That's one of the reasons you don't have profit limitations when.
Well, my answer to that would be the inclusionary requirements are going to take away enough profits so they'll want to do 40Bs. I mean, let's face it, we can't defer to builders that just worry about profits. That's what the values of this country stand for. It doesn't help us in housing. And I mean, I think that people don't have to make that much all the time if they have an easier, simpler process, is what 40B is supposed to be.
We are one of the communities that 40B has not touched very much. So this, we don't get many 40Bs.
Well, virtually all the ones you put in your document We did 40Bs.
Right, not in Barnstable.
What?
Not in Barnstable.
Oh, no, some of them were, but not all of
Yeah.
them.
Most of them aren't.
I think we did 4. But
Okay.
it just bugs me because, it's been there for so long, and it made it easier in a lot of ways for us to create affordable housing, and the cities did it and the towns didn't, because the towns were offended by somebody else telling what to do with their zoning. And here we are, in this huge mess.
Just wanted to agree with Laura and Paula. The inclusionary ordinance, I think, is critical. I think the tiered approach is a good one. The zoning that Paula, I've kind of put all that together, the inclusionary ordinance and the zoning in one. And Paula's idea is a good one in terms of the budget. And I think it's time we free up the town and suggest that we contract out this position. Why not? We contract out our water department. Let's contract it out. Let's get something going. I mean, but they always say the definition of insanity is trying the same thing and thinking you're going to get a different result. We're not getting it unless we change the parameters somehow. So in the interim, maybe we contract out that position. Why not do something flexible? It should all options on the table. It's just craziness with all this stuff. So I think we've honed in on our
Does the person not
4.
get benefits then?
What?
Does the person not get benefits then? Insurance, retirement, and so forth?
I don't think so. If you're contracting out, I don't know.
Why wouldn't fewer people want the job?
I don't know.
I'm saying I don't think the salary is that great that people jump on board. I don't know how.
The last time it was 80,000. I was told by Jim Kupfer. It was 80,000. They said we needed to pay more. That's what he said to me.
Well, the town has history of contracting out certain functions.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
addition to what Betty has said, the administration of the CDBG funding has been contracted out because it was difficult to, hire someone for that position. So it does, I think we're moving in that direction where we're identifying something as a priority, and we're not saying how you get it done. It's just like, we want to get it done. We want to, and whether it's this regional housing office that miraculously, is able to do this.
Usually my experience with contract people is that they're for a period of time. This is going to be long-term.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not there's a qualitative difference sometimes between having someone that you hire versus a contractor.
Well, you can hire a company, and they can apply an individual to it, and then they have other resources in the company
Exactly.
to beat people up or do whatever they have to do.
Well, you can spread expertise among
Yes. that's a
different
better way of
people
putting
where
it.
it's difficult sometimes to hire one person who has it all.
You say it in a nicer way than I did.
But
Well, I'd also add with what Paul is saying, the assessors, they contract out. I mean, you think they're doing all the crunching, all the numbers? No. I mean, I just think maybe we need to reinforce that you can look at this a different way. You don't have to have one person. One person may not be the solution anymore. It didn't work before, and it may not work going forward. And that's all I'm trying to say is we give the option to be creative on this and do something different. And maybe, the regional thing that Charlie was, recommending that might be the impetus to do this in a different way.
My guess would be the reason they didn't hire somebody is because the person didn't have experience. And that's going to be, that is often the case when you're talking about this kind of a job. So the rules that I learned in graduate school of business, where it takes a year for them to be productive and 5 years for them to be an expert. And, and so you just live through that first year. And, but when you don't hire somebody because they're the right personality, the right skills, they had a history that was successful in anything they've done, but they don't have specific experience, which they wouldn't have, we know that. There are very few people who would have specific experience doing this. So they didn't hire him. That's what I was told, they didn't hire him because they didn't have the experience.
So I think there's some functions that contracting out, I'd be indifferent to. The one thing you lose with any type of contracting is I'll define it this way, the passion and advocacy for a particular issue. And I know firsthand of some of our employees in town who, it would be very difficult to replace, what they bring to the table, because it's not like they're just doing their job, but they're thinking, beyond and
They're thinking about it when they're in bed at night.
and they're able, because they're part of the staff, they're part of the community, to reach out to other people within the town. So again, as much as I wouldn't want to just completely divorce housing, from the town staffing, there might be certain functions that could be, completed, in a contractual way. And I think the assessing department is a good example of what you're saying, that there's certain things, you want a director of assessing, but there might be a lot of functions about actually doing, that is done better by an outside entity, so.
Well, I kind of think we have our four, Rick, that I think we can, start, what Paul is saying, start backing up and getting I think we've reached a degree of consensus.
But shouldn't we zip through the rest of these too?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, we got 15 minutes, we can finish off this list. Well, I don't know if it's a rule that we have.
I may have to leave about 5 minutes too, so just.
Okay, so the zoning flexibility allowing duplexes.
So that would be under the zoning.
We already
Yeah, I
saw-
think we said
We
zoning
said
already.
zoning.
What?
We already said zoning, so zoning would
Okay.
have flexible and.
Well, marketing, that was my thing. I don't think we can just do this and be quiet. I think we have to talk about it. But we probably wouldn't go to the council with that one. Do you object to that? Everything's about marketing in this country now. That's all it is. Yeah. You convince people whether it's right or wrong to do something, and they do it. You don't want to say.
No, I think it kind of goes back to my comment about if you can hire somebody who is passionate and an advocate, you're kind of taking care of that issue. But I'm not
We all have a
sure.
voice too.
What's that?
We all have voices too.
Absolutely, but whether that's a strategy I'd recommend to the council, I'm not.
No, it isn't one
yeah.
I would.
No.
No, but I'm just, creating we always already talked about 10, 11, create affordable housing units in existing developments. That is to provide some kind of subsidy from one fund or another to increase the units of affordability and,
I think that comes under increased revenue, and it's probably a recommendation to the trust more than it is to the council.
but it is a possibility.
It's a possible strategy if there was revenue, if there was enough revenue to do it.
I don't know how it would work, but there's got to be hundreds of times where people go to a market apartment and say, oh, I really need a place to live, but I can't afford this. And they say, go to your fund in town and see if you can qualify for any help.
That's rental assistance.
Well, yes, but it's a different kind of rental assistance.
No, because if the town's doing it, if the town's paying for it, then it has to be, open and fair. So you can't just take, it has to be, you have to advertise it and do a lottery or have a waiting list or whatever. It's a bigger,
There always used to be first come, first served programs. Don't any.
no first term, no,
None-
no first
none
come,
now.
first served, no. It's-
Rick, you
it's
might
not
be,
fair.
there are options for people to come to the Lombard Trust, to get actual one-time assistance
Yeah.
for rent or mortgage or whatever. But I think if you want a whole full-on program of rental
So
assistance.
that's off the table. No, that's
I mean, nothing's off the table, but I think if we're prioritizing, it might not rise to the
Not one
level
of the
of,
priorities.
of,
I was thinking of it more as going to a landlord and saying, you know, we would write down, we'd give you X amount of money for you to make this an affordable and put a deed restriction on
I
it.
mean, the problem with Section 8 and is that they're all fixed in how much money you can earn and everything. We're talking about people who earn more money than that. They wouldn't be eligible for Section 8 anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of them. With the increased cost of housing.
Right.
and, You know, but anyway,
Okay,
I mean, it would be useful if you could do it.
if you could do it, I think
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Well, obviously increasing the percentage of affordable units in proposed, I mean, if it was me, I'd just define it all. I'd require them all to do the same thing and have rules, and they either do it or they don't
Right.
build.
Well,
period.
that's,
That's what I'd do.
that's what the inclusionary would do.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that really falls into that.
Yeah.
so.
Using, the next one's using CDBG, that's administrative.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's-
Use federal community development money for home repairs, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's an
Do we do that
administrative.
now? We
No,
don't do it.
we don't
never
do
did
it. No,
Now, that doesn't, it preserves housing, but it doesn't create it.
right. It preserves housing, typically for seniors.
Yeah. Any comments about that before we?
No, I think that's administrative. I don't think that's a suggestion. That isn't
Now,
something for the
quick
council.
question, so where do we go from here? We went through the list.
Cindy, how much have you captured of this? Because I could maybe, recall what we talked about and try to redraft some of this.
Well, if you have to leave, you could leave, we could pick this up at the next meeting, but I just thought a comment about where we go might be good so that I don't make a fool of myself again.
No, I think we've kind of narrowed it, combined some things. It's the question of how we get it down on paper.
Yeah.
So it'll be some combination of working with Cindy, looking at our meeting tape to try to assimilate what we've talked about and bring it back in some form for discussion at our next meeting and see if we feel,
Yeah, and I think it might be helpful to put it in the form of strategies,
Yes.
goals, and objectives, because we've had pieces underneath,
yeah, so if there's
Yeah,
Okay, before you leave, we should establish a date and a time for the next meeting. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, if everybody looks at their schedule and chooses a day, I will check that day with Sarah to make sure that there's staff available. But it's getting 9 people to commit to one date and then seeing if that date's available with Sarah.
It's better to do it now than it is to do it later. So, I mean, today is Monday. Is Monday a good day for people?
So the question is if we wanted to meet on the 13th or the 27th.
Of January.
If those are the two Mondays.
Yeah.
The 20th is Martin Luther King, I believe.
Mhm.
Well, how many people here can make it on the 13th at 4 o'clock?
13th?
Or 13th?
I think I can, yeah.
For the 13th.
I think that works. I've got some travel plans that I'll have to
Which
check.
day are we looking at?
The 13th of January at 4 o'clock.
The 13th of January is
Can we make it back
Saturday.
at 3? Or was there a reason why
Oh,
we
wait a
moved it
minute,
to
I'm
4?
in 2024, hang on, 2025.
I don't know why.
The
I'd prefer
13th
a
is a
little
Monday,
earlier.
yeah.
What?
13th is a Monday.
Now, do we want to do it at 3? Because I was originally thinking this is 3 today, but it was 4.
I'd rather do
3
3.
is
I'd
fine.
rather get out of here before
Okay,
6.
so 3 o'clock.
On the 13th,
Yeah,
3 PM, okay.
thank Thank you, Cindy.
Well, thanks, everybody. I found it helpful to have Mark here today. I thought that was good. It isn't necessarily the core of what we're doing, but I think it's important to understand what some of the possibilities are for the future of Cape Cod, because it does enter into your thinking about things you do now.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to see this happening 50 years. I won't see it happening 50 years from now, but God, we've got to do better. We have to do better.
You'll need a motion to adjourn.
We need one, huh?
I move.
Motion to adjourn?
I'm so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You are adjourned.